Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mostly Mets. I'm Jimmy Mack, and today I'm going to talk about some problems that the Mets have right now in spring training. So far this spring, I've been very optimistic about what's going on. You look at Clay Holmes and Soto, and a lot of guys really performing well and staying healthy. Over the last week or so, we've seen some of the opposite. So obviously, the first thing that we have to get into, the news that just broke yesterday morning, and that's Francisco Alvarez being out for 6 to 8 weeks. Now, this is a huge loss for the Mets, not only because we expect him to have a bounce-back season with the bat, but also because of the way he handles the pitching staff. He's a guy who the pitchers love to throw to. He has a great rapport with the guys. He really is part of that pitching staff in a way. He helps them improve, helps them get better, calls a great game. So I think that's really the biggest thing we're going to miss here, because obviously, honestly, he hasn't been all that great with the bat over the last year, right? He hasn't been so great with the bat this spring. And even though we expect a bounce back, it doesn't mean he will definitely bounce back. But even if he gives you not much with the bat, he still gives you that handling of the pitching staff that you really need, especially with some guys who, let's be honest, aren't really necessarily major league pitchers right now, or guys who are changing from being a reliever to a starter. With Clay Holmes, I think he'll miss Francisco Alvarez. So I think it's obviously a big loss. Now, I think Luis Torrens having a good backup like Torrens is great. He gives you pretty good defense, and he has at least a decent bat. Most teams don't have a backup catcher that you're necessarily comfortable with. Now, obviously, we'd love to have Alvarez in there, and it is a downgrade to go to Torrens, but I don't think it's that bad of an option, right? He gets his hits. He plays decent defense. He's fine for a month, right? If Alvarez is going to miss 4 to 6 weeks to start the season, I don't think it's really a big deal to just be able to play Torrens every day, or 5 out of 7 days, and that's going to be fine. He can hold the fort until Alvarez comes back. But now you're kind of stuck looking for a backup catcher, right? There's talk. They don't know if they're going to stay within the organization or go outside of the organization for a catcher. Stearns, basically, when he was interviewed, said he's not quite sure yet what they're going to do, but they do have some internal candidates that they're looking at. And the internal guys, they're not that exciting, right? There's not a lot of guys who have a lot of major league experience or have the best skill set, who have a lot of success in the minor leagues even. So it's kind of tough to see who would be that guy. But there are 3 options right now. Yesterday, Jackson Reitz in the game yesterday hit a grand slam, and he's been a career minor leaguer. I believe he was drafted in 2014, and he's just kind of kicked around the minor leagues for a while. He did get a little bit of major league time. He has 16 at-bats total in the major leagues. Not very impressive, but he's a guy who does have power, right? He has 85 career minor league home runs, so he can provide a little bit of pop. Not much of a defensive catcher, but he's adequate, and he provides you a little bit of pop. I don't think you're going to see much offense out of him at all. He would just be legitimately a backup catcher who's there just to catch, so Torrens can have a day off. Another option would be Chris Williams. Now, he's a little more intriguing because over the last 3 years, he has 66 home runs in the minors, and he's a big power guy. But he doesn't really provide much else. He doesn't give you much defense. He doesn't give you much contact hitting. He's mainly just a power threat. So I don't think that would be the worst idea in the world, having a guy like Chris Williams who can basically provide you not as much, but the same type of player that Alvarez is, at least with the bat, right? He can hit some home runs, and he's adequate kind of everywhere else. But he's another guy who has no major league playing time. He's never sniffed the major leagues. I think he was drafted in 2016 or 2017, and he's never been up. So you might not necessarily want a guy like that to be relied on as your backup catcher for a team that has aspirations of winning and making the playoffs and going on a run. But for a month, who knows? you can get by with him as your backup catcher for a month. And the last guy is Hayden Senger. Now, he's more of a prototypical backup catcher. He's not going to give you anything offensively. He's just not a hitter. He hasn't hit in the minor leagues. He's never been to the majors. But we saw in spring last week or 2 weeks ago, he made a great throw, getting a guy out at second base. And he's a really good defensive catcher. So I could see them going more that route. Terens is going to be your everyday guy for a month or maybe 2 months. And then Senger is just your guy who fills in when needed and plays great defense and doesn't give you any offense. He'll hit ninth in the batting order and just give you defense. So those are really the three main internal options. I don't really see anyone else being able to, fit in there. So those would be the three guys that you could see making the opening day roster with Alvarez being out. Now, the interesting thing, it was reported by a couple different people that the Mets may look to go outside the organization. And there's three real names that jump out at you, one via trade and two via free agency. Now, the first one, you would have to trade for him, although it's been rumored that he will not make the opening day roster of the Tigers, and that's Tomas Nido. We all know Nido. He's been here before. He was here for a long time. He was kind of a fan favorite, even though he wasn't very good. You know what you get with him, right? He's adequate defensively. He doesn't really hit much. Just really a career backup, AAA kind of catcher. But at least he has major league experience. You know what you're going to get out of him. You don't have to wonder. So it's intriguing. I don't think you'd have to really give up anything to get him. If he doesn't make the team, obviously he's probably DFA'd and then the Mets pick him up. If he does make the team, or if they think he's going to and they decide they want to trade him, it's probably cash. You're probably just sending cash or a player to be named later. You're not giving anything up for Nido. So it's not exciting, but at least you know who he is. You know the organization. He would be fine as a backup catcher for 6 weeks while, Alvarez is out. Another option, and one that I think is crazy, but I'm seeing a lot of, and that's picking up James McCann. James McCann spent 2 years with the Mets. He was not good. He signed a big contract in free agency. They thought he was going to be something that he never became. And honestly, he doesn't give you anything defensively, and he doesn't really provide you any offense anymore either, right? He's still got some pop in his bat, but at this point in his career, I think he's 34, 35 years old, he's not going to provide you much of anything. And I don't know how well he really left the Mets. That when he was on his way out, he was basically the backup catcher. He wasn't very happy in that role. And I just don't know how well that would fit, right? I don't even know that he would want to come to the Mets. And I really wouldn't want him. So I would say no to James McCann if it was me making the decision. Obviously it's not, but at least he's a major leaguer who could be your backup, and then you could DFA him in 6 weeks when Alvarez is back. The last option that I've seen really thrown out there is Yasmani Grandal. Now, you know the name Grandal because he was at one point, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, a top catcher in baseball. He was one of the top guys. But really he's been really a part-time player the last few years, really the last 4 or 5 years. He kind of goes from team to team. He played last year with the Pirates, kind of in a backup catcher role. He still has some pop, and he's still good defensively. If you're going to go that route, if you're going to go outside of the organization, this is kind of the guy I would pick up the phone and call. I don't know how much he has left in the tank at 36 years old as a catcher. Those guys don't usually play that long. But I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world. At least maybe even give a little veteran influence on the team. I don't think it would be the worst call in the world. Do I think that he is going to recapture what he was 6 years ago? No. But as a veteran presence who you can count on and just be a backup until Alvarez comes back, I don't see it as a problem. So if you're going to go outside the organization, this is probably the phone call I would make. But really, I don't think it's that much of a difference between one of your minor league guys and Grandal at this point in his career. I don't think he's going to add that much more except for maybe that veteran influence. So that's really all I'm going to talk about on Alvarez. Obviously, big loss. But the next thing I want to get into is something that kind of less people are talking about, but it's almost more concerning to me, and that's Brandon Nimmo. Nimmo's been out for a week or so with a knee issue. He just got an injection in his knee, a gel injection to lubricate his knee. It seems to me like that's going to be a lingering thing that he's going to be dealing with all season and probably the rest of his career. It sounds like he just has a bad knee at this point. And this is coming after a season last year in which he had the plantar fasciitis and the issue with his foot that he had to manage. So I don't know what we have with Nimmo anymore. The nagging injuries are starting to really pile up, and it's getting to the point with me where I don't know if you can count on him going forward, right? I don't know if he's really part of the core of this team. Now, he's going to be on the team because he signed for 5 more years after this at $20 million a year, so he's not going anywhere. But it seems to me at 31 years old, he's already kind of broken down. And that's an issue for the Mets. You know, they signed him as a center fielder and then immediately moved him to left field. And he cannot stay healthy at this point. Now, I love Nimmo. I think he's a homegrown Met. He's been with us for a long time. But I think you have to look at yourself and say, can we really count on this guy to give us 100 and even 40 games? And I don't think you can anymore. Now, he doesn't miss a ton of games, but that's because he's always playing with pain. And you can see last year his numbers dipped dramatically. His power went up a little bit, but his average went down, his on-base went down. Like, everything was going down while his power went up. Now, if he can kind of transition into maybe being more of a power guy who's a real threat to hit home runs, then I don't think it's going to matter as much, the injuries, because you don't need him running the bases. You don't need, I think we're running into an issue now with Nimmo where when the Mets went out and signed him, we all wanted Nimmo back. We all wanted him to go back, and there was the rumors that he was close with Toronto and, all this stuff, and we were upset. We wanted Nimmo back, and we're kind of stuck now because that contract will hinder the Mets going forward. Now, I'm not ready to say that he's a broken down old player at 31 years old, but when these small injuries start to pile up and start every year, there's another issue. It's a foot, and then it's a knee, and then it's a back, and then it's going to end badly, and I'm hoping that it hasn't kind of ended already, and we haven't already seen the best of Nimmo. Now, he's scheduled to start activity today. They were going to re-image his knee, and as long as there was no issue, then they were going to allow him to start baseball activities. So maybe he's fine. Maybe the injection works, and I'm overreacting here, but it really seems like these injuries are starting to mount, and I'm not loving it. I'm not loving what's going on with Nimmo right now. If you're still watching here, please comment. What do you think is going on with Nimmo? Do you think that he's done at 31? Do you think that he's just going to continue to kind of regress and have these nagging injuries? Or do you think I'm just overreacting and he's going to be just fine? The last thing I really want to get into here is the issue that we're having with Paul Blackburn. Now, before spring training started, I wasn't really that worried or concerned about Paul Blackburn. I didn't even really think he'd play much of a role for the Mets going into this season. But now with Manaea out for probably the first at least 2 weeks to a month of the season, and Montas out probably till May or maybe even June, he's going to play a big role. And what you've seen so far in spring training just is not very promising. He's only pitched 4 innings, but he's given up 6 runs. He's walking everybody, giving up hits. He just has no life on his pitches. He's just looked really bad. Now, I understand he's coming off of an injury. He's coming off the spinal issue where his spine was leaking. Still one of the strangest things. But I don't think... I know the Mets right now aren't looking at, we're not looking at the results, right? That's what they're saying. We're not looking at the results. We're just letting him work and get healthy and get comfortable and get back out there on the mound. And I get that. But the results are so bad that you have to kind of look at it and say, I don't know if this guy can do it, at least to start the season, right? Maybe he needs a longer spring training. Maybe he needs, I don't really know. I don't know what the other option would be. Is it Griffin Canning in the rotation? I hope not. we all look at a guy like Max Kranick and how well he's pitched, and Clay Holmes as well as they've pitched, and you can kind of pencil them in at this point as being contributors. But you look at a guy like Blackburn, and you don't see how he's even a major leaguer anymore. Now, I was never a big fan of Blackburn before he came to the Mets, and I definitely wasn't a big fan when they traded for him. But at least you figured, well, he's a veteran guy, back end of the rotation, 5th or 6th starter. He's not going to kill you. He'll give you 5 innings and give up 3 runs and whatever. It doesn't even look like he can do that at this point, right? This is a guy who has almost a 5 ERA in his career. And I understand it's only 4 innings in spring training, but he's up to almost a 12 ERA, and he just looks terrible. So I don't know how you go into the season with him penciled in as a starting pitcher for you, as one of your 5 or 6 starting pitchers. I just don't get it. So I think we do have an issue there. Now, I don't know that they're going to fix it. I don't think they're going to do anything to fix it. But this is my concern at this point. I don't know how you go into the season with him as one of your main starting pitchers. It just doesn't make sense. I'd much rather see them, give Sprout a chance, or maybe, I don't know, maybe there's a guy out there they can sign or trade for. The trade thing is kind of interesting to me because we've been talking about Alcantara and about Dylan Cease and Michael King and all these guys on this channel, and many people have spoken about that. And it seems like those guys really aren't available right now. But it was reported by, I believe it was Andy Martino, he said, the Mets are not interested in any kind of depth rotation pieces at this point. They like what they have in terms of their depth, but they would be willing to make a trade for a top-level starter. I think it was John Heyman. I don't think it was Andy Martino. I forget who it was. I saw it somewhere. But right now, the Dylan Ceases and the Sandy Alcantaras aren't really available. It was reported that, Cease was available, but he's really not anymore. What they were asking for was high, nobody was biting, and they pulled him away and said, okay, we're not trading him anymore. So what I believe it was John Heyman said was, if Cease becomes available again, he would expect the Mets to jump in on that. They would jump in on Alcantara if he becomes available. So I think those are possibilities, but I don't know that they're possibilities going into the season. Now, I will say, with the Yankees losing Garrett Cole, most likely for the year with Tommy John surgery, it seems he's getting a second opinion, but at this point, they're not very optimistic, and he's most likely getting Tommy John surgery. So he'll be out at least this season. I think that kind of ups the price for a guy like Alcantara, because the Yankees are probably going to be interested in a guy like that. He doesn't make a ton of money, and he's still under control for another couple years. I think a lot of teams would be involved for Alcantara, and now with Cole going down, I think the Yankees would get involved in that, whether it's Cease or Alcantara. So is it possible that maybe he becomes available now in the spring because now the Yankees are calling and making an offer, and the Marlins say, oh, well, if we're thinking about trading him, let's see where we can get the best deal, and then they kind of make him available to everyone? Then I think the Mets could jump in. Do I think that's going to happen? Probably not. I think that's more of a trade deadline acquisition, but you never know. It could happen. I think at this point we are what we are, and I don't really see any more additions going forward. So that does make me worry about the pitching staff because of Blackburn and to a lesser extent McGill. You already know what you're going to get out of McGill. You're going to get maybe 2 good innings and then a bad one that knocks him out of the game. Or sometimes he goes out there and pitches 6 innings and he looks amazing and you're saying, where did this guy come from? But he's not, I don't feel like McGill doesn't kill you. I think Blackburn, if he pitches like he has in spring training and he's not really ready to go, he is going to kill you. It doesn't matter how many runs you score. If your starting pitcher comes in and gives you 2 innings and gives up 6 runs, you're not going to be successful. You're already behind. It ruins the whole game. You're done. So while I hope that he comes through this and this is just early spring training coming off an injury, I just don't really see it happening. I'm worried about Blackburn here. And in turn, until Minaya gets back, I'm worried about the rotation in general. So let me know what you guys think. Comment. If you're still here, subscribe. Give me a like. And yeah, that's really all I got. So until next time, let's go Mets.